All right, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well on this day after the Seattle Seahawk tie. It's always a little bit awkward when you don't have a victory or a defeat to talk about, but it is preseason, so I don't think the end result of the game in terms of who scored more or fewer points really matters. But I want to take a look at Pro Football Focus, and this is something I've been doing for a little bit now, where after every Seahawks game, I take a look at what Pro Football Focus thinks, not because I think they get everything right, nor because I think they get everything wrong, but because I know they put a lot of work into this, and I think the things that they say and the things that they think have merit, even if they may occasionally not reflect reality with full accuracy. And generally speaking, I feel like Pro Football Focus does good work in most areas. I'd say there are some areas where they're a little bit lacking, but let's have a look at what they thought about the Seahawks on offense last night. And this, I think, is mostly positive. Not everything is positive, but the stuff that matters is, I'd say, more good than bad. And that's not just from watching the game last night, which of course I did, which of course I think that if you're watching this video, we all did. It's also from the way PFF seems to have taken things. Now, if you just take a look at the overall grade, this is just the overall grade of each player that played at least a snap offensively last night. It seems to me that the stuff that matters, the players that actually have a real chance of making the team, it was mostly good. It wasn't all good. And when I say that, what I mean is somebody like Nick Collerup, who ended up being by far our highest graded offensive player last night, pretty much exclusively because of his run blocking. That doesn't really matter because Collerup has no chance of making this roster, and he actually has very little chance of making this practice squad even. That kind of stuff doesn't really matter. But here's some stuff that does matter a lot. We had a couple of starters on the offensive line last night, and of the guys that we had on the offensive line that are going to start, both of them were graded very highly. Abe Lucas was our second highest graded offensive player, 81.5. Really well-rounded scores. And Gray Zabel, who also played, I think it was the whole first quarter, very well graded across 20 snaps. Again, pretty well balanced. Nothing stands out as, oh, this was a big problem for him. And this was going up against, I know the Raiders are probably going to have a terrible defense this year, but it's still going up against legitimate NFL starters. For part of it. I don't want to over-exaggerate things, right? Now, Eric Saubert graded very well. I don't know if that matters. My gut tells me Saubert makes the team. I don't know if that means he plays very much. But something like Mike Jarrell, maybe it doesn't matter this year, but this is a guy who really has a chance of being part of the future plans here. Abe Lucas is in a contract year, and at absolute worst, you need depth at the tackle positions. Jarrell is an immensely talented guy who just needs time. And maybe that time is starting to pay off a little bit. I don't want to go too far with anything, but he gave you 20 good snaps last night, graded out very well. Guys like Jacardia Wright and Luke Felix Fualalo, they were graded well last night. Unlikely to really matter. Neither guy has a path to making the team, realistically. But Josh Jones, he was graded well. And that's a guy who's definitely going to make the team and could easily play this year, depending on what happens with the health of some of these players. Holani graded well. He's fighting for the roster. Torrey Horton, I don't need to say anything there. We all know that Torrey Horton has a chance to play an important role for the 2025 Seahawks. Robbie Oots graded well. I know it's just 8 snaps, but they liked what he was doing in the passing game and as a blocker. And that's kind of the cutoff for players that Pro Football Focus thought played especially well. So it's a mix. It's a mix of players that are unlikely to be relevant for the 2025 Seahawks or any Seahawks team going forward, and players who we want to see good things from, right? Now, if you keep going down the list, you'll find some more players that are unlikely to make much of an impact, but Drew Lock graded out okay. For some reason, they dinged him really heavily on the running, which I don't I don't really know where that comes from. He converted a quarterback sneak, and there were a couple plays where he took off for a couple yards, but I don't really know what he was doing so wrong. As a passer, they thought he was actually quite good. You can see Ricky White, Derek Young, Jake Bobo, all kind of clustered in the same area. These are a bunch of guys fighting for maybe one roster spot. And then you start getting into the guys who were a little bit more mediocre. Elijah Arroyo predictably gets dinged for his run blocking, which that's just going to be par for the course with him. But his other stuff, his receiving stuff, even his pass blocking stuff ended up being pretty workable. Milroe gets a pretty poor grade, which I think is justifiable. We saw some good stuff, but we also saw some rough stuff. That's going to be the Jalen Milroe experience for the time being. And then you start getting into a handful of players that were actually, according to Pro Football Focus, kind of rough last night. Whether or not you agree is, of course, always going to be up to you. But the ones that matter, if you're looking for stuff that is actually impactful, would be Bradford was not graded very well. I think that's fair. I don't think he was terrible. And they didn't grade him terrible. But I can't really sit here and say that he's earning that starting job. It feels like maybe he's getting handed it because nobody else is even remotely competent. Jalen Sundle, mostly I think because of the penalty he picked up, not graded well at all, really. Now that just means he's probably not going to start this year, but I think we all knew that Oluwatimi had pole position anyway. Christian Haynes, not graded that well, which I don't know if I agree with that. Maybe if I looked at every single snap he played, I'd feel differently, but I didn't mind what I saw from Haynes last night. I thought he did a decent job. Brady Russell, that was a devastating penalty he picked up, so that's what happens. Lomia, poorly graded. So again, this is what I'm talking about with the right guard stuff. Bradford is kind of getting handed a golden path to the starting position. And then you got stuff like Federico Moranguez, who, look, I understand it's preseason. You're going to play players that have no chance of making the team and very little chance of making the practice squad. But can we not play Moranguez at center and instead give those snaps to Haynes just to see what's up? That's way more important for this team going forward. Excuse me. Oh, late night last night. And Cody White, of course, worst graded player on offense because he dropped the ball. Like, there's not much else you can say. You don't get very many opportunities in a preseason game like this. You can't be dropping the opportunities that you get. All right, so that's the bird's eye view of the offense, just to go over it. I'd say more good than bad. There is some stuff that is at least a little bit concerning here, but it is the first preseason game. If you want to dive a little bit deeper than that, the passing chart, one of my favorite things to look at that PFF does, you can get an idea of what the quarterbacks are doing in terms of where they're attacking the field, where they are looking when they're in the pocket, and Locke did a good job spreading it around. We saw some deep, intermediate, a lot of short stuff, a couple of things behind the line of scrimmage. So it's a good mix. You can see him using the middle of the field some as well, which that's always going to be a key measure. He uses the middle of the field more than the boundaries. You can also look at Milroe's passing chart. Nothing downfield for him in this game, which, if you watched it, that certainly lined up with what we saw. Some intermediate stuff, mostly shorter stuff, nothing behind the line of scrimmage. So we'll see how this develops. But one of Milroe's greatest traits is his arm strength. So at some point, I'd like to see him push the ball down the field because I think that is something that he might be able to do pretty well at the NFL level. Did not get to see it last night. Will get to see it at some point. Rushing direction, another thing that PFF does that I'm a big fan of. This takes a look at where the Seahawks ran the ball. Did they run the ball outside left, outside right? Did they run the ball up the gut? Did they run the ball off tackle left, off tackle right? Where were they running the ball? Where were they effective? And it's as expected. They were most effective running the ball to the outside the tackle, outside the tight end. They made good headway. They did good work when they ran the ball outside the line. Left end, which is outside the left side tight end, they averaged over 10 yards a carry and a touchdown. Running the ball outside the right side, which is outside the right side tight end, 9 yards per carry. And they also had decent success running off tackle. 3.6 yards per carry left, 5.5 yards per carry right, including the touchdown. And then they get into the middle here, left guard, right guard, and then just straight up middle. Not really a lot. And you look at the grades that guys like Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes and Jalen Sundell got. It makes sense a little bit why they might have done that. It makes sense why that may have been the end result. I don't think that it was all bad in the middle. Obviously, I think Zabel, even though you can see that PFF did not think very kindly of his run blocking in terms of the end result, I thought that Zabel played fine. But it is worth noting that trying to run the ball up the middle remains a struggle here, and it's going to be until we find some stability. Okay, continuing kind of the theme of the offensive line here, that is the main stuff I like to look at when it comes to offensive PFF scores. Pass blocking. Let's start with the pass blocking. This was the part that I thought was good. I thought the pass blocking last night was quite good, especially when it mattered. And you can see that mostly the grades are positive. Mostly we're seeing things above 60, a lot of grades above a 70. A lot of these players may not matter that much, like Bryce Cable do. He's got long odds to make the team, I think, at this point. Jacardia Wright, obviously, he'll be lucky to make the practice squad. But Jalen Sundell, at the very least, had a good pass blocking grade in here, which he didn't play a great game, maybe, but that is something that he excelled at in a pretty decent sample size. Mike Jarrell, same thing, graded out pretty well in this area. No pressures allowed at all. In fact, you got to get pretty deep on this list to find players that did actually allow pressures last night. And Abe Lucas, that's obviously very important since he's going to be a full-time starter for us. And even a guy like Elijah Arroyo, it's not a lot, but it is something. Blocking is not going to be a strength of his. We know this. We accept this. But for whatever it's worth, he did get 3 opportunities to pass block last night, and they graded him well on it. They thought he did his job. Ray Zabel, above average. Not a huge sample size, 11 pass blocking snaps, but they think that in his first ever even semi-NFL action, they thought he did good. Amari Kite, who I don't think he'll make this team, but I think he did play well last night. You can see that being reflected in how he was graded. The only player on this team that allowed more than 1 QB pressure last night was Josh Jones, who was probably not even really a tackle, who was probably more of a guard being forced to play tackle because of circumstance. And I don't think he played badly last night, to be perfectly honest. I think that he played fine. But other than that, everybody else, it was either one or none. Not to say that everybody played good in this area. Bradford, obviously, not graded out well. And we had Christian Haynes get graded really poorly, allowed a pressure. Lomia also, which is not great. And Damian Martinez. This is an area of football that I don't think Damian Martinez was very good at last year in college. And I don't know if this is going to be something he's ever very good at. I know he looked good at it in camp, but they gave him a couple opportunities to pass block in this game, and he gave up a pressure. And that's really about it in terms of the stuff that even slightly matters. But overall, I feel like it's more good than bad. Run blocking, on the other hand, there is some good, but I feel like things are a little bit more down the middle, where there's good, but there's also bad. Part of the problem is that 2 of the guys that were graded at the top, Felix Fualalo and Collerup, they're not making this team. So they get graded really well, and that's good for them. Props to them for gutting it out and putting up a good performance, but what's it really matter? The answer is not a heck of a lot. Lucas and Zabel, on the other hand, I mean, we saw them clearing out some of those lanes. We saw what they were doing to Crosby for even a part of that game. I loved seeing that. So to see them getting a good good start to their season run blocking was great. Josh Jones, Mike Jarrell also getting some credit here. Robbie Oots, hello. And then you kind of start getting into the more mediocre guys. Again, nothing that I would really think about all that hard, like Milroe and Locke. Do we really care how good they are at run blocking? No. But you get down far enough, Christian Haynes, Anthony Bradford, Lomia, Arroyo, Sundell. This is where he really kind of lost the plot last night. He couldn't run block, and he had a penalty. So it's definitely a mixed bag here. Also, way more zone run blocking than gap run blocking. We'll see if that carries over the regular season, but I expect it to anyway. So that is going to be the bread and butter. And that's it for PFF offense. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Defense later.